Russia is trying to spy on the UK, and the UK isn't going to let that happen. Worst of all, Russia has tried this trick twice. It sent its spy ship into British waters in late November of last year, then again in January 2025. Both times the UK tracked it and sent a message to the Russians. "We know you're here and we're not happy about it." So what actually happened? What vessels did the Royal Navy use to track the Russian spy ship? And just what is Putin trying to pull with this move in the first place? We answer those questions and more in this video. Let's start with the most recent encounter. On January 22nd, the Royal Navy, the UK's powerful naval force, announced that it had detected the presence of a Russian spy ship named Yantar sailing in British waters. In response, it sent both the HMS Somerset and the HMS Tyne to track the Russian vessel. These are surface vessels, with the HMS Somerset also having the ability to launch Merlin helicopters into the skies to covertly track targets. That's precisely what the ship did in January. Out of sight of the Yantar, the HMS Somerset's Merlin helicopter took flight, after which it scanned the waters around Britain using its powerful sensors to detect the presence of the Russian ship. The Yantar was soon located, sailing towards the English Channel, allowing both the HMS Somerset and HMS Tyne to move to its location. The HMS Somerset, which is a Type 23 frigate, caught up to the Yantar and intercepted it right at the entrance to the channel and just south of a traffic separation scheme located in Ushant, France. "The Royal Navy is always there when the nation needs, protecting our home and the waters that surround it," said the HMS Somerset's commanding officer Matthew Tier. "This is routine business for the HMS Somerset Ship Company and the Royal Navy, but it's nonetheless vital work for the UK security, and I'm proud of the professionalism of my crew." The reality is that Britain and its NATO partners knew what the Yantar was up to long before it came close to the channel. NATO ships have been tracking the Russian vessel's movement since it arrived in French waters, with the HMS Somerset combining with the HMS Tyne to take over those duties. Using its radars and sensors, the HMS Somerset reported on every move the Yantar made during the operation, sticking close to the ship as it made its way through the channel and beyond the Strait of Dover. It was the second time in January that the UK had to shadow a Russian vessel in its waters. But by now you're probably asking the question, where's the submarine in all of this? No British submarines were involved in the January Yantar monitoring, but this wasn't the first time Russia had to send its spy ship into British waters. Russia had already tried to do it before in November 2024, and that time the UK sent one of its subs. Speaking about the January 22nd incident, the UK's Defence Secretary John Healey revealed to Parliament that he had ordered a Royal Navy submarine to track the very same Russian ship in British waters only a couple of months before. The move was a deterrent measure, according to Healey, who said that he deployed the submarine when he discovered that the Yantar hadn't just made its way into British waters, but was loitering suspiciously over some of the UK's most important undersea infrastructure. "Let me be clear," Healey told the UK Parliament. "This is a Russian spy ship used for gathering intelligence and mapping the UK's critical underwater infrastructure." That encroachment was so severe that it led to Healey changing Britain's normal rules of engagement for dealing with naval issues. What we saw in January 2025 was a typical response. A trespassing ship is detected, so Britain sends out a couple of its own, along with a helicopter, to demonstrate that it knows the ship is there and to follow it no matter where it tries to go in British waters. That response is usually enough. The Yantar wouldn't waste any time loitering over Britain's undersea infrastructure when it was being watched, because it knew it would force a response from Britain's Navy. What happened in November 2024 was far from typical. The Yantar was already in position. So Healey deployed multiple measures to deter the Russian spy vessel, including the HMS Tyne and the HMS Catterstock, a mine countermeasure ship. While Yantar isn't armed, it's suspected of undersea cable sabotage, making its presence a serious concern for the UK. Healey also scrambled the RAF to send aerial assets into the skies to watch the Russian ship, and sent the surveillance ship RFA Proteus to watch the Russian vessel and shadow its movements. But unbeknownst to Russia, Healey also deployed a submarine. "I want to confirm to the House that I authorized a Royal Navy submarine, strictly as a deterrent measure, to surface close to Yantar to make it clear that we had been covertly monitoring its every move," said the UK's Defence Minister. Britain was sending a message. "Long before you saw our on-sea response, we could have sunk your spy ship any time we wanted." Healey even made that much clear, concluding his statements by adding, "I also want President Putin to hear this message. We see you, we know what you're doing, and we will not shy away from robust action to protect this country." Healey also emphasized that the UK is cooperating with its NATO allies to track any and all spy ships Russia might use to learn more about Britain's defenses. The one thing that Healey didn't mention was the type of submarine Britain used. The Warzone, or TWZ, believes it has the answer. Though the submarine wasn't named, it said that the vessel would have had to have been one of Britain's Astute-class subs. So what makes the Astute class such a threat to the Yantar and other Russian spy ships? Measuring 318 feet long and crewed by 110 Navy personnel, the Astute class is Britain's main nuclear-powered attack submarine. It was designed by BAE Systems, with the UK having 7 of these powerful submarines in its arsenal. The Astute is one of the first nuclear submarines to have been designed to be built using a 3D computer-aided environment, and it's a major threat to any ship on the surface. It can stay in the water for up to 90 days, reaching speeds of 29 knots to quickly approach surface vessels like the Yantar. However, the real danger of the Astute is that it doesn't need to get particularly close to a surface vessel to cause damage. Its precision munitions can strike home on a target from a range of over 621 miles. For context, the English Channel is 150 miles at its widest and 350 miles long, well within the Astute's strike range. If deployed in January, it could have targeted the Yantar before it even reached the channel. That range comes from the powerful weapons on board the submarine. The Astute-class vessels are equipped with Tomahawk Block 4 cruise missiles, each of which has a TERCOM terrain contour mapping-assisted inertial navigation system. That's a complicated way of saying that the Tomahawks can combine radar measurements with pre-implanted terrain mapping data to locate their targets. Those missiles actually have a range of 1,000 miles and can reach top speeds of 550 miles per hour, giving the Yantar no chance of avoiding it should Britain have chosen to fire. Add Spearfish torpedoes, capable of traveling up to 40.3 miles to give the sub a close-range option, and mines to that equation, and the Astute is more than capable of taking out any Russian spy ship. Of course, that's not how the UK used the submarine when Russia encroached on its waters. It wanted to send a message, not escalate its long-standing issues with Putin. That's why Britain chose to have the submarines sneak up on the Yantar and surface nearby. It was a warning. We could have destroyed you at any time. Now get out of our waters. The Yantar got the message. TWZ says that the spy ship quickly moved on from the position in which it was loitering, though it still tried to conduct a little more surveillance. Under the watchful eye of Britain's Astute-class submarine, Russia's ship moved into the waters east of Dublin, Ireland, raising concerns that it may have been scouting for the location of key pipelines and cables that connect the UK to Ireland. It didn't stay long. Ireland's offshore patrol vessel L.E. James Joyce escorted the Yantar out of the Irish exclusive economic zone, while the Irish Air Corps monitored its movements. So how did the UK know this spy ship was in its waters in the first place? We already have our answer from the Royal Navy's comments about these missions. In January 2025, Britain's Navy was working alongside its NATO partners, so it knew the Yantar was coming and was prepared to escort it away as soon as it was found. It's likely that similar information passed between NATO allies during the November submarine surfacing incident. However, there's another interesting aspect of the Yantar that makes it much easier to track than other spy vessels. It's equipped with an Automatic Identification System, or AIS. This system broadcasts the ship's position at regular intervals, with that position being tracked by transceivers on other ships. The data collected is then published by several online ship tracking services, which means the Royal Navy could watch the Yantar as it moved and get into the perfect position to intercept. However, AIS isn't a real-time tracking system. It relies on ship transceivers, which means the Yantar would have to be in range of another ship for its location to be discovered. The ship's location had been picked up about 23 hours earlier in Belgian waters during the January incident, giving the UK a good idea that it was on its way to the English Channel. Combine that with constant monitoring by NATO partners and it's clear that Britain's message, both in January and November, was 100% accurate. It had eyes on the Yantar and it knew exactly what it was doing. That all leads us to another set of questions. Just what is the Yantar, and why does the UK consider it such a threat? The vessel certainly isn't dangerous in an attacking capacity. It's a Russian research vessel that's been in operation since 2015 and doesn't appear to be equipped with any weapons. That means it's not a warship, which is likely a deliberate choice by Russia. Sending a frigate or corvette into British waters would cause an escalation that could lead to weapons being fired. If the Yantar has no weapons, Britain would have looked like the bad guy if it fired on the ship using submarines or other vessels. What the Yantar does likely have is a stock of mini-submersibles. The New York Times reported on these submersibles back in 2015, claiming that the Yantar has at least 2 of them on board that it can deploy at any time. Popular Mechanics repeated the claim a couple of years later, adding that the mini-subs and the Yantar itself are likely being operated by Russia's main Directorate of Underwater Research, which is essentially the country's underwater spying division. The Yantar is essentially a mothership for these tiny submarines, Popular Mechanics claims, and it has built-in hangars installed for stowing these submarines out of sight until it needs to use them. Of course, the presence of these submarines alone wouldn't be enough to prove that the Yantar is a spy ship. Many similar underwater research vessels utilize similar submarines to explore the deep ocean. However, when you combine this submersible capability with the many times the Yantar has been caught in waters that it has no right exploring, you start to see a pattern of Russia sending the ship into sensitive areas. The pattern goes back almost a decade. The Yantar has been found loitering near undersea telecommunications cables ever since it was introduced into the Russian Navy in 2015. That very same year saw it sail around the coast of Guantanamo Bay, which is perhaps best known as the place where the US maintains a prison camp for inmates it considers to be threats to national security. In October 2015, the Yantar was exploring again, this time in Norwegian territorial waters. And the list keeps going. Russia's supposed research ship managed to somehow find its way to Greenland in the summer of 2016 and was active in the eastern Mediterranean a year later, where it loitered around an undersea cable that links Israel to Cyprus. Fast forward to 2020 and the ship was found lurking around more undersea cables, this time off the coast of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. The Brazilian Navy caught up to the crew and questioned the presence of the ship in Brazilian waters. All of the Russian sailors avoided definitively answering any questions and turned off their identification system when the Brazilians landed, which is suspect behavior at the best of times and downright suspicious given the Yantar's location. The November 2024 submarine incident wasn't even the first time that Russia's spy ship explored the Irish seas. August 2021 saw it spotted off the coast of Ireland, sailing parallel to the AE Connect 1, which was a submarine communications cable. Russia's ship spent close to 24 hours in that position before sailing onto the English Channel. 2 years later, it was spotted off the coast of Norway and shadowed by the Norwegian Navy. This time, the Yantar was operating without the AIS we mentioned earlier, a clear and intentional effort to avoid being tracked as it entered another country's waters. The November 24 and January 25 incidents in British waters can't be explained away by Russia. There's a clear pattern here. The Yantar constantly finds itself in the vicinity of underwater telecommunications cables and power lines. It has a history of trying to hide what it's doing, either by turning off its AIS or due to its crew refusing to clearly answer questions when it's caught in the act. Add the mini-submersibles believed to be stowed away in the ship, and it's clear what Russia is trying to pull. It's scanning deep waters to find key infrastructure used by Russia's enemies. The question now is simple: why? Russia tries to claim that it's using the vessel to collect data on the ocean environment, but the evidence suggests otherwise. It's sailing and loitering in British waters because it's trying to pinpoint the locations of key underwater cables. We already mentioned the submarine telecommunications cables near Ireland, which were the likely target in November 2024, but the English Channel is no stranger to these cables. It's home to the first subsea cable that's connected the UK with France for over 2 decades, the cross-channel system. That cable is a key part of the internet backbone running through both countries, and it represents the lowest latency fibre connection between the Equinix LD4 hub in Slough, England, the Intertion PAR 3 hub, and the Equinix PA7 located in Paris, France. Essentially, the cable is important for providing high-speed internet in both the UK and France. There's also evidence that there's a cable running underneath the sands of Cornwall, which is in Britain's south, that provided the most powerful physical internet connection between the two countries back in 2009. And in 2020, Britain's national grid powered up a cable in the English Channel, again connected to France, that enables the two countries to share surplus energy with one another. Similar cables are also installed in the seabed near Denmark and Norway to link the UK's national grid with clean energy supplies in those countries. You're probably starting to draw your own conclusions now. All of these cables are key to the UK's power and internet infrastructures. If Russia is able to locate them, which is clearly what it's trying to do with the Yantar, it will be able to target those cables should Russia ever find itself at war with Britain. Taking out those cables could cut power to multiple areas of the UK and damage internet connections the country's military uses to communicate and its people need to keep Britain's economy running. No wonder the UK was so quick to send submarines and other vessels to confront the Yantar in November and January. Russia is trying to uncover Britain's weaknesses, and what might it do once it finds these undersea cables? We barely even need to ask that question because we're already seeing Russia carrying out its plans elsewhere. Sabotage. While Russia still seems to be scoping out Britain's underwater cables, it may be actively attacking those used by other nations. On January 27th, less than a week after the Yantar was discovered in British waters again, Sweden announced that it had seized a ship named the Vejen. Flying the Maltese flag, the ship is believed to have been involved in a sabotage operation in which it deployed its anchor and destroyed an undersea cable in the Baltic Sea. A Bulgarian shipping company named Navigation Maritime Bulgara later claimed that the Vejen was one of its ships and that it had dropped its anchor due to high winds. There was no malicious intent, the shipping company claims. What does this have to do with Russia? There's a suggestion that the Vejen wasn't the only ship in the region at the time the damage was caused, with Latvia claiming that it saw a total of 3 all in the same area. But perhaps even more intriguing is the idea that Russia is carrying out its sabotage operations using what the conversation calls a shadow fleet of vessels that aren't owned by Russia but are essentially under its control. The months prior to this incident had seen several instances of ships seeming to deliberately drag their anchors in waters that are home to undersea cables in the Baltic Sea. That's precisely what the Vision is accused of doing. And if it's found to have dragged its anchor by the ongoing Swedish investigation, that immediately rubbishes any claims that the ship simply dropped its anchor to stabilize in high winds. It was involved in sabotage. So Russia's tactic seems to be clear: send its own ships out, mostly spying ships operating under the guise of research, to scan for undersea cables in another country's territory. When it finds them, rather than deploy its own ships and take the blame for its sabotage operations, it uses its shadow fleet to do the damage for it, allowing it to deny all involvement. Britain's reaction to the presence of the Yantar in the English Channel and Irish waters gained even more context with that strategy revealed. The UK had to surface its submarine to show its strength in the face of Putin using his ships to spy in their waters. It also had to do it to show Russia that it understands the games Russia is trying to play. The question now is whether Russia is going to use a ship from its shadow fleet to attack cables in British waters. Do you think it will? And what do you think about Britain revealing that it deployed a submarine to intercept the Yantar, along with the other ships and aerial assets it used to show Russia that it knew what Putin was up to? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out UK submarines can destroy Russia in 55 minutes, or click this other video instead.